Today is February 25th, 2020. We are now on our agenda and item 2, starting our regular city council meeting. It is 7:04 p.m. I call this meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes. 4-1. January 28, 2020, regular city council meeting. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for January 28th. There seem to be some corrections from Ronnie, as long as those are included.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, so discussion, we want to make sure. Comments from Ronnie. And for what it's worth, Ronnie is here with us.
Yeah, so I sent my changes to Summer, so hopefully you guys got them, so I'm fine with that.
Okay. Got it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mayor, quick question. I don't know that it has to be this way for everything, but when I reread the ordinance for electronic meetings, I think the votes have to be on a roll call.
They do.
Okay, happy to do that. Kaylin?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Into section 5 reports. Let's see. I participated in some press calls and spoke with legislators of all levels regarding the Sam Flats parcels that we opposed with resolution number 6 to 2020. And it is exciting to report that we were fully supported by those that represent us and the governor. Big thanks to the governor, and thanks and gratitude to the BLM for deferring the nominated parcels. And I think I emailed everyone on the council the official letter that you're free to share of the BLM deferring the parcels. Very exciting. On February 14th, I went to Salt Lake City to celebrate with BIGA, the Film Day on the Hill. Also attended Rural Caucus that day. Also attended a press conference for the Utah Raptors State Park that is well on its way to being our newest, best state park in the state of Utah. And then also attended a women's march with other female leaders, including mayors from other cities. I attended last week Tuesday last week Tuesday attended the joint meeting with the county, and then later some of us meeting with the DAC. And then Wednesday went to Salt Lake City on Wednesday to attend my governor's Rural Partnership Board meeting and participated in Rural Day on the Hill. Also, at yesterday's LPC meeting, the League of Cities and Towns, as you all know, does a weekly update of which we participate. 4 of us from the city participate, 3 plus me as a board member. So legislation of interest, I just wanted to quickly go through a few things. One is HB 273. This is an important one because this would have a big impact on us. And for what it is worth, the League is in opposition to this bill. It includes compensatory damages. If, let's say we're in a land use disagreement with a developer and it goes to court. I mean, we have a real example of that. If the ombudsman makes a preliminary decision now we could still move forward and go through the process of a lawsuit. With this new bill, this would weaponize the property rights ombudsman, and Joel, maybe you can do a better job of explaining this, but essentially would make it so that if the finding were not in the city's favor, we would be required to not only pay legal fees, which we're currently required to do, but also all other compensatory damages. So that could even be emotional. So it's kind of a big deal, and it would really affect the way in which cities decide how to enforce land use authority. So that's one bill. It's a big yikes. Other communities are watching it as well. And like I said, the league is in opposition to it. Another bill that's worth noting, HB 374. You might want to write that one down because it actually changes the law to say that cities, municipalities, cities and counties, would not be able to provide or require any design criteria for single-family residence, including height. Or, excluding height, including minimum square footage. So all of the conversations we've been having about square footage, if this bill were to pass, we would not be able to regulate that anymore. Additionally, this bill allows a developer, if they have architectural and engineering plans that are stamped by a professional, they can hire their own building inspector and go through their own process and not work with our building inspector to do required inspections. So again, the league is in opposition to this bill. However, there is hopefully coming out a substitution that might be more favorable. So that one's pending, but it's definitely of concern. Then also, Ronnie, I'm going to let you talk about House Bill 190. But that is all I have from me for now. Mike?
Okay.
I was just going to say I wasn't able to attend the most recent LPC meeting because I'm here in Washington, D.C., so I don't know if there are any updates, but it's basically legislation that makes emergency medical services a required service for municipalities, just like fire currently is, and law enforcement services. So when I was last updated, UAC, the Utah Association of Counties, was in favor. The Utah League of Cities and Towns was still developing an opinion, and I heard from the mayor that ULCT has come out against it, I believe because of a lack of a funding mandate. But maybe you can just clarify that, Mayor. And I don't know if they're still working on that or if that's kind of a firm stance at this point.
Nope, that's good. That's correct. Ronnie, do you want to go ahead and give your update?
I don't have much of an update other than to say I've been out of town for my dad's memorial, but I did come out to Washington, D.C. with members of the Moab Tailings Project Steering Committee for our annual lobbying trip to try and sustain funding for the tailings pile removal at least $45 million a year. And our meetings are going well so far. We had our first day of meetings today. We had collectively 8 meetings. We met with 9 members of the Department of Energy. Then we met with 3 senators, including Senator Romney, and 4 representatives, including Representative Stewart from Utah. So the meetings seem to be going well, and I figure I can give a more comprehensive report when I come back at the next council meeting.
Amazing. Thanks for being out there. Glad you can participate electronically.
Yeah, thanks. Going well so far. I'll let you guys know.
Mike?
Thanks to Carly in particular for facilitating, for helping organize a city and groundwater sewer coordinating committee, if you will. The county's been banging on me for a long time to get this going, so Carly made us extra efforts, so kudos to her. Main thing the county's interested in is knowing what any sewer rate changes we have, because they have to pass them on to their participated in this Walnut Lane Selection Committee. There's more meetings coming on next week. Water Advisory Board, Carly gets more kudos, all right, for helping to get that bunch organized. We've been meeting for more than a year now. The state requires that we, every 5 years, I think it is, produce a water conservation report. That's coming up in another year or two. But that committee has also been intensely interested in the availability of water, you know, how much water we have in the aquifer and so forth. So we just spent a lot of time arguing and not enough time actually getting something done. So thanks to Carla for helping make that go better. There's an Emma Lane meeting on Saturday. Joel was there. I want to thank him for facilitating that. That was great. Joint city-county meeting. Emily has already talked about that. Did you guys all get invites to a Seek Haven telephone survey as well? I thought, okay, so.
I did, they set up an appointment, but they didn't ever call me.
Really? Yeah. How many of you did it? Yeah, good for you. Yeah, I did it too. Oh, so Seek Haven is trying to expand to the tune of $10 million, which is a lot of money, just to add some more room. But more on that later on. Yesterday did a KZMU radio interview up with some high school students. That was a lot of fun on the subject of universal basic income. I guess Andrew Yang, one of the Democratic presidents, has been big on that one. So it was fun. And finally this afternoon, the Moab Museum is getting closer to being open. They did a preview of what the place is going to look like. It's much wider and brighter, and they got a number of little iPads, I guess they are, that have sequences of pictures that you can page through. It's kind of cool. It's very nice. So that's it.
Thank you, Mike.
Ronnie's done. Okay, I attended a Canyon Healthcare Special Service District meeting. It was actually kind of fun to get back into the medical field, and it's kind of like riding a bike. You remember what all those acronyms mean. And it's a pretty fun board. One of the things that, a lot of it was just reviewing financials and administrative items. The Care Center has hired a new administrator. Her name is Colette Lyman. Excuse me. She should start March 16th, and everyone that interviewed her just had absolutely nothing but good to say. Everybody on the board was in complete agreement that she was the one that they wanted. They've got a very good organization over there, and so it's not like she has to come in and rebuild it from scratch. I've worked in care centers where that had to happen, and it's not a fun time. They had their annual survey, which is a survey that the state does on every care center and every assisted living center in the state. And they didn't get any, I can't remember what the right term is. They didn't get in trouble. Their food service quality needs to be increased a little bit, but that's because it's hospital food and everybody just has a bad impression of hospital food. I also attended the Housing Authority meeting. I didn't stay long because I had to get back to work. And again, a lot of that was just their financials and administrative work. They have the possibility that some people want to donate their home when they pass away to the Housing Authority to be long-term workforce housing. The details of that lease and how it would work out are still left to be figured out, but I thought that was a really interesting idea if you wanted to bequeath your property to the Housing Authority when you die so your children don't fight over it. And finally, I attended the Moab Museum Board meeting, and as Mike stated, they're doing some sneak previews right this week. If you didn't go over this afternoon when we were invited as council to go, there will be people there for most of the day, Friday and Saturday. Just give them a call and let them know when would be the best, because they do have some scheduled people coming in at certain times, but I am sure that they will be happy to accommodate you. I was also given a tour of the museum on Friday and taken upstairs. One thing that this museum board has really, really tried to do is increase the professionalism and the methods by which the museum stores and cares for its items and its artifacts. And if you ask to go upstairs, because it really is incredibly impressive. My words to Forrest, who's the interim director, was it looks so grown up. And that's part of what the goal is with the museum, and they call it the refresh, is to show other museums that we are capable of caring for their items so that they will be willing to loan them to us for temporary exhibits. And this group has done a really, really good job of doing that. Like Mike said, it's much lighter and much brighter. They took part of the upper floor out, so the ceiling is really high. And you may walk in and think that things have been removed. They have been moved. They haven't been removed. They're probably being cared for much better than they were before just being displayed in the museum. So it looks very different. So don't be shocked when you go in there. It is different, but rest assured that the items that are there are being cared for in much more archival ways, and being cared for much better so that they don't deteriorate. That's it.
Thanks, Tani.
Okay, so I attended the event at the high school on learning how to help our children rise above the negative effects of social media. Colin Karchner speaks across the country to kids, parents, and educators and communities about the connection between social media and screen addiction. It was a pretty small turnout, which is unfortunate because the night before, Colin presented in Arizona to 5,000 people, and if we were lucky if there was maybe 150 at the high school audience. It was incredible. As an adult, there was quite a bit to learn about our own usage and what we're sharing, and as an example to our kids. So if anybody has the opportunity, he has a TED Talk on YouTube, which would be worth watching. And if you ever get a chance to see him in person, I would highly recommend it. Let's see, we held the census update fill-in complete count committee meeting last week as well, which gave Carrie Valdez from the Grand County Library the opportunity to explain to members what the funding for the census grant, how it could be spent, and what we have plans on spending it on. If there's any community group that would like bags or buttons or stickers or flyers for their members, we hope to have the materials by April 1st at the kickoff census party at the library. So if anybody needs materials, you can reach out to me or Carrie at the library. Participated in an interview with national newspapers with the mayor and the chair of the county council on the oil and gas leases. Mike Duncan and I also participated in an interview with KZMU up on the Slick Rock Trailhead over President's Day weekend. Attended the joint city council meeting. I went to a school board meeting, and the district funded a new position this last year for a school nurse, and it has had very effective results for the schools. Mary Frothingham has been able to help students get Tier 2 vision exam, which is unprecedented in the school district. Tier 1 is mandated by the state, and that is just vision tests for distance, but Tier 2 tests vision and convergence tracking and color. And she's been working very closely with educators on getting results with Dibble testing that elementary school children take. And if they fail, she's able to acquire funding for full screenings with Dr. Hackney, and so far there's been 17 kids who have been able to use certificates to get glasses and have full exams. So that's really positive. And Mary has also been working on a primary care model with health providers at the hospital called SPURT, and it's screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. And it's used to identify substance abuse and dependency of alcohol and illicit drugs to see if we can implement a countywide program to help adults and children. This collaborative effort is used in 30 states, and it is ranked as one of the top 10 public health accomplishments in helping with addiction. So if she can get the support she needs, we can look at implementing these strategies at the schools and with medical providers in our community, which is really cool. I went to the Western Conference Junior High Science Fair at Colorado Mesa University. And then I attended the Key Leader Board meeting today. And a little background again on what this board is. It's a group of members from a wide variety of disciplines trying to work out the most impactful need for our community. It has been a 2-year process, and what has cultivated is intergenerational poverty with a 2-generation approach, and that means 0 to 3 early childhood education and giving parents the opportunity to go back to school or to learn new skills with a trade. We had a guest visitor, Carrie Aldred from Carbon County, and she's with the Rural Utah Childhood Development Program. Basically, it's Head Start, and she informed us that there's a $100 million grant that will be due this spring in trying to get funding for startup costs to expand and create early Head Start programs. And we feel very optimistic that we'll be able to get a childhood development center off the ground, because the funds could be can include funds for renovations for a spot that maybe the city or the county or the school district already has for an existing location. It could be potential for buying a modular to locate on private or public land, and for paying for staff. So Mallory's going to send out an invite to city and county staff and to the land trust, and so we can have a discussion on locations and opportunities there. And then, Mayor, this is for you. Mallory would like to present potentially at our next city council meeting or the one after that, so she can present the SHARP survey results.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she.
problem.
Okay. Perfect. That's it.
Thanks, Karen.
I met with Casey Cook, the new acting superintendent for the Southeastern Utah group of national parks, to talk about the Arches transportation and visitor experience planning, which is just getting underway. They're in a information gathering stage, and hopefully she will come talk to us a little bit more about that in the near future. I attended a webinar on parking reform for the 21st century on emerging best practices to provide for parking needs while better supporting a human scale city environment. I went to a meeting with city and county staff and a few local developers with a consultant called Incremental Development, who's going to be helping us work on facilitating small scale and local residential and commercial development. And there'll be more about that soon. And went to a Moab Dark Skies meeting. Just want to remind you all that there's a star party tomorrow night in conjunction with the APA Utah semi-annual conference. So hope some of you can make that. Solid Waste Special Service District meeting was kind of the usual stuff, although we did discuss the permanent CIB capital improvement project list, and in conjunction with other local government needs, therefore. I went to a couple of stakeholder meetings on North End dispersed parking, at least one of them some of you were at. And Travel Council, fourth quarter international travel here is down slightly. The Moab Area Travel Council has taken over the Dinosaur Diamond brand and redeveloped the website. I And Greene County is one of the most dinosaur-rich areas in the world, so we're going to be capitalizing on that. And the Travel Council, in conjunction with some other impacted counties, is considering rerunning the Mighty Five ads in Europe. Promoting tourism. I also attended the Travel Council Sustainability Committee meeting. We had a phone meeting with Tim O'Donohue from Jackson, Wyoming. They have put in over a decade of work towards certification under the Global Sustainable Tourism Council standards, which is a broad and rigorous third-party certified set of standards for both helping your community be more sustainable, and it's how it runs all its tourism-related stuff, and also communicating that to visitors. So that's pretty exciting that the Travel Council is looking at engaging in that way. And that is it.
Fantastic.
Mayor, may I? It has to do with the Travel Council, so it was through the chamber. May I just make an announcement real quick?
Sure.
So if you are a local business in Moab and right now you have a free marketing opportunity through the Travel Council, your business can be listed on Discover Moab, their website, and it gets over 3 million visitors a year. And the Travel Council distributes 50,000 guidebooks and over 300,000 direct web links to local businesses. So if you are a new and emerging business, please reach out to the Travel Council directly or visit discovermoab.com/listing, because this is a great opportunity for you to get the word out on your businesses.
Thanks, Karen. So now we're on to section 6, administrative reports. Joel?
Mayor, I'm going to start out by thanking Zachariah for being here tonight, and I'm going to turn the first part of my time over to him so he can go home and save whatever is left of his Tuesday night that can be saved. So he's going to give us an update on transportation planning that's been happening in the Moab area.
Thank you, Joel. Welcome, Zachariah. Yep, in your USB. It's called a dongle.
My favorite word.
Technical term.
It's always good to have the opportunity to say dongle.
I think when I was growing up, I would have gotten my mouth washed out with
Yeah,
soap.
I know.
It has two names, and the other is not much better.
Well, while you're getting set up, Zachariah, I'm grateful that you're able to join us tonight for, are we talking 5 minutes presentation?
5
10
minutes, sure.
5 to 7? Carter's
Shorter the
laughing
better.
because I make everybody be brief. Very grateful that you're here tonight because there have been conversations, as we all know, about transportation. So it's good to know what's going on.
If you push it again, it'll click up now.
All right.
Ronnie, right now, just so you know, we're just looking at Zachariah's PowerPoint that he emailed us earlier, so.
Thanks, I got it.
Great.
Okay, so Joel and Carly asked me to come over tonight and provide you all an update on transportation planning efforts in the Moab area, and there's a lot of exciting work happening right now. So this is going to be somewhat high level, and then I can answer questions as needed. So at a high level, really what is happening right now is a conceptualization of a 3-phase approach to transportation planning. And the first phase is a regional transportation plan. Following that, we will conduct a joint city-county transportation master planning effort. and then following that, a transit study and design process. So the way this will all play out is that the regional transportation planning effort, which is being spearheaded by UDOT, will kick off very soon. So I've made one slight modification to this PowerPoint from what I sent to Joel and Carly earlier, and that is to specify that this meeting tomorrow is really at the staff level. So I don't want to give the wrong impression that a kickoff meeting is like, you know, a kickoff meeting for a big group of stakeholders, and if you didn't get an invite, then why didn't you get an invite? And really tomorrow is an opportunity for the consultant, which is Fair and Peers, and the project manager of that is John Nepstad. Some of you may remember him from other planning efforts in the area. He will be down in Moab and meeting with staff from the participating agencies just to make sure that we're all organized and prepared to do a more outward-facing kickoff. So a little bit more about this effort. UDOT continues to show great interest in our area and great support for our planning issues and opportunities. I can't speak highly enough about the support that they have granted in recent years to our area. So UDOT taking the lead on this effort. It will also include the city of Moab, Grant County, San Juan County, and Sitla. And the total valuation for this effort is roughly $150,000, somewhere between $130,000 and $150,000. The city's contribution to this effort is $10,000. The county's contribution is $10,000, and we are participating through a cooperating agreement. Okay. The next phase.
When was that signed? Just for reference.
I think December.
It was just last year, end of last year.
Recently, yeah, within the last few months.
Thanks.
The next phase of transportation planning is a really exciting phase, in my opinion, which is a joint city-county transportation master plan. This is exciting for a couple of reasons. First, the county's transportation master plan, which is referred to as the Spanish Valley Transportation Master Plan, hasn't been updated since 2008. The city has never had a transportation master plan. It's also exciting because this is a very clear move in the direction of collaboration between the city and the county in a very significant planning effort. I anticipate that we'll kick this off at the point where the regional transportation plan is roughly 50% complete, although that's not set in stone. Once again, this is being supported by UDOT. We were successful in acquiring funding through their new Transportation Technical Assistance Planning Program, and the value of this planning effort is $150,000 as well. In this phase, the city will be contributing $15,000, the county $25,000. Okay. The last phase of transportation planning that is contemplated is a transit evaluation and design. Okay. For this phase of transportation planning, we anticipate using federal 5304 funds. These are federal funds that are administered by the state, and the intent is exactly what the title of this phase communicates. We will be looking at a bona fide public transit system and what kind of design would work for our community. Again, it's not set in stone, and we haven't actually applied for the federal 5304 funds yet, but I anticipate that we would be looking at a start date or a start time of when the joint transportation master plan is about 50% complete. So what I'm trying to give you is a picture here that one phase kind of follows the other, and we're working from a regional geography down to the local geography, down to a system within that geography. I want to be clear that a transit study and system in this context is definitively not a shuttle system in the park. Okay, so I don't want people to get confused. Now, I will say that there are significant benefits of establishing a public transit system outside of the park, because if you ever want a transit system inside the park, we need to figure out a way to get people from the downtown core to the park boundaries. I will also say that this is not a tourist shuttle system. The federal program is very clear that you need to have a base level of service for your year-round residents. Now, you can have a bump in service during the high seasons, but you cannot drop service as a result of lower demand in your off seasons. Okay. I know you said 5 minutes, but I'll wrap it up on this last slide. Okay. So just a little bit more information about the scopes of work associated with each of these phases. Okay. This is high level. It's not every element of what we will do in each of these phases. It's just to give you a sense of how they all link together. So in the Regional Transportation Plan, UDOT will be bringing its state travel demand model to our region, and we will be working to specify that model for travel demand patterns in our region. That's a fairly big undertaking, and it will eat up a fair amount of the cost of this regional transportation plan. But nevertheless, the focus will be on 191 and also the interaction with local connector roads, okay? So it's not just 191, it's really the interplay between 191 and everything that's happening in our region. It's really important that we go through this exercise because in order to get projects on Utah's STIP, or the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, which is a 6-year program of where the state actually, puts the bulk of its, big transportation infrastructure spending. We have to have these projects identified in regional and local plans. So it's a key element of the Regional Transportation Plan. The Joint City-County Transportation Master Plan, like I said, would update the county's more technical transportation master plan and establish the city's first transportation master plan. It's a small valley. There's no reason why we create 2 of these documents, side by side. This is more technical in nature. It'll include, the elements that you would typically see in a local transportation master plan. This time around, my office in particular is going to be very focused on incorporating active transportation infrastructure into the local transportation plans. It's also really important for the city and the county to have these plans because in order to establish transportation impact fees, you need to have transportation infrastructure projects identified with cost estimates that can then be assessed on new development, right? Those impact fees are to cover the costs of serving the new development, and a lot of our transportation infrastructure going forward, frankly, is to serve new growth. Mm-hmm. The last phase is a transit evaluation and design. Again, this is not a park shuttle. It's not a seasonal shuttle. It's really for year-round public transit. We haven't even applied for these funds yet. We're a ways away from really getting a grip on what this looks like. And so I want to just be clear that there's no predisposition to a specific form of transit. It varies throughout the state. There are additional programs or funding programs in the state available to cover operational costs and asset acquisition. So, the study and the design of a system is phase 1 or step 1 in that process. And so, once again, I want to really communicate my support, appreciation for UDOT's support. If you look at the valuation of the transportation studies that they are helping with, we are basically leveraging local funds at a 5 to 5.5 times our local contribution, that rate of leverage. So that's really significant. We're putting in, $40,000, $50,000, and getting, $400,000 worth of planning assistance here. So it's a big deal, and there's a lot going on. Admittedly, I am not a transportation planner per se, but obviously it's very connected to land use planning and economic development, and in small towns you wear a lot of hats, and so Chuck and Bill from the county and I have been working closely together to bring this all to fruition.
Zachariah, thank you so much. It's helpful as we're talking about all things like the parking situation downtown. We've been talking about a shuttle, an in-town shuttle, and then also the bypass. And from what I remember, sitting in the meetings where the city committed to being part of this, hearing in order for us to access these federal dollars for projects like that, we'd need to have these plans in place. So thank you for the effort to get us organized, to get us there. And if anybody has questions, we should email you, right?
Sure. Or if you have any burning questions now, I can answer a couple.
I do. I'm just curious that the joint city-county transportation master plan, I mean, I know you don't have anything concrete, but
Sure
what's
is.
what's a guesstimate for timing?
So the regional transportation plan has a 1-year planning time frame on it. So if you think, 50% completion, that's looking at the fall. So September, October, something like that.
Yeah, one easy question for you, if I may.
That's a guess. We'll see. We've been awarded the funds. Oh, one thing I should note is that with the regional transportation plan, with UDOT being the lead, we followed their procurement process by selecting a consultant from their general engineering and consultant pool. For the joint city-county transportation master plan, through this TAP funding program at UDOT, we actually follow our own procurement policies. So the city and the county will have to decide who will actually be the lead on the contract with UDOT, and then they will be basically reimbursing us on a fee basis. But we will follow our own selection process, which is great. I mean, I think that there's a lot of advantage of having the streamlined selection process that UDOT can follow, but we can actually solicit proposals from a wider range of consultants and get a full picture of what a consultant would be, working on.
So Zachariah, so the end product of all this, Zachariah, I thought I heard you say is for primarily year-round residents as opposed to visitors? I thought I heard you say
For the
that.
transit study?
Yeah.
So the program, as I understand it, requires you to have a base level of service for your permanent population, because it's really intended to be, a true public transit system. There is an understanding that in, tourism-based communities and in many other types of communities, there is a need to expand service during periods of the year, and so there is an allowance to do that. And so, in some ways, it's a matter of semantics, whether you're increasing service during your busy seasons or you're dropping service during your low seasons. The point is that there is some opportunity to increase service during our tourist season.
And that's just for the federal funding?
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's other funding.
And frankly, there's a lot more we have to learn about this federal 5304 program. We're at the, elementary level of understanding how it works in the state of Utah. So.
Thanks, Zachariah.
Thanks, Zachariah.
Shall we have Rachel
Yes.
join us? Fun with sales tax. Thanks, Zachariah. Thanks, Rachel.
Thinking. It didn't disconnect before it got unplugged, so it has to think for a second.
Oh. Having attachment disorder.
Hello.
Hello.
So I just wanted to give you a sales tax update, but before that, I was just going to show you really quick where we're at in the budget process. All of the departments have submitted their budget requests for the next fiscal year. And this week I've been meeting with each department head so that they could go through and explain the details of their budget prior to beginning the work on the administrative recommendation. Just a reminder, a balanced budget is presented to City Council by April 1st. On the schedule, I have it March 25th, so that hopefully we could have a budget workshop on the 1st to start the first review of the budget. And strategic planning will kind of tie into that as well. Strategic planning this year falls right in the middle of the administrative recommendation process. So just wanted to show you where we're at really quickly since the census was brought up. I just wanted to show you our local option sales tax. This is one of the many ways that the census directly impacts the revenue that comes to our community. So this tax, along with Class C road funds, is calculated, the amount that we received from the local option, 0.5% is calculated based on our local population. So you can see that number right there, 5,322. So the more people that can be counted in the census, the bigger that number gets, the more revenue we directly receive just based on our population. And it's of the overall local option that is distributed statewide. And then really quick, just kind of a revenue update. Utility billing, we haven't talked about that for a little while, so I was just going to show you our new sewer rates went into effect in November, and we're seeing anywhere from a 9 to 12% increase in residential sewer and about a 20 to a 29% increase in commercial sewer. The way the sewer rate structure is put together, it's not a flat percentage increase. It actually redid our entire billing structure for sewer. So we're just using actual numbers to determine what that net effect will be on our sewer revenue. So since we did a rate increase, overall it looks positive for next year that we'll be bringing more sewer revenue, which is very helpful. We're in the process of doing the water rate study, and we should have a draft of that in the next week or so from our consultants. So the expectation would be that water rates will also need to increase this next fiscal year so that we can meet operational needs. As you know, this year, water operations was actually budgeted in a deficit. So the fund was budgeted to lose money, which is never good. So water rate structure will be coming soon. And then I just wanted to show you the delinquent utility accounts. You can see since July and August, we've been on the decline for the number of delinquent accounts, which is a direct result of the efforts of our city treasurer staff, our assistant treasurer, and our billing clerk, getting out better communication and early communication. December went up a little bit because people tend to get a little more delinquent during the holiday month. But overall, we've had a trend of people paying their bills on time, which helps us with revenue as well. And then yesterday I got the February distribution for sales tax. So I'll just take just a couple of minutes. This is for this fiscal year. And we went through January. You can see February overall revenues are pretty similar, but I wanted to show you based on individual. So the month of February went down from the previous year. You can see, looking at February 2018, 2019 actually went up quite a bit from the previous year, so it makes sense that February would come down. Transient room tax, however, came down quite a bit from last year, so a lot of people were saying that December seemed really quiet, and our tax figures are showing us that. Last time I talked to you in January, as you may remember, we budgeted a 7% overall increase for sales-based taxes for this year for revenue. As of January, we were coming in right about 9%, and I was saying don't get too excited, keep your fingers crossed. So we had a decrease in February, and we came back down to 7% overall, which is still good, still positive. That's what we budgeted for the next 3 to 4 months. We're not really certain what to predict with travel trends, so we'll hope that whatever decreases in international travel or other travel, that hopefully we are insulated. We found right after 9/11 that we actually were insulated from that trend because more people chose to travel domestically and by car. So our sales actually remained static and went up a little bit during that period, where the rest of the travel industry took a pretty big hit.
And the travel trend you're referring to is coronavirus, the effect of coronavirus, or?
Yes, just from reading the news today and the warnings that have been issued
Yeah.
for overall travel. So
Yeah.
hopefully not, but as finance director, I just want to kind of prepare that since the majority of our revenue is sales-based tax, we just want to make sure that we plan accordingly. And just a reminder, all of this information is available to you on our dashboard. The sales tax revenue, actually what we're looking at right here, is available to the public. That was based on a request originally to share it with the Chamber of Commerce, but it can be accessed by anyone in the public at moabcity.org/taxes.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you so much. Unless anyone has any questions? Carly?
Great. Just real quick, I wanted to follow up on an item that Councilmember Duncan mentioned. So in 2016, the city entered into an ILA with the Spanish Valley Water and Sewer Improvement District when we built the new reclamation facility. And one of the terms of the ILA is it requires that the city create a wastewater advisory board. The ILA says the board membership must consist of 2 people appointed by Moab City Council and 2 people by the district. So Dana from GWISA has been diligently reaching out to Joel and myself about finally creating this board. And Councilmember Duncan and I met with her and a representative from Spanish Valley to talk about what they had in mind for its scope and kind of logistics. The need that we identified, the 4 of us identified, was how critical it is for our respective agencies to coordinate and information share regarding operations, capital projects, sewer rates, because that impacts their rates and everything. So like Dana and Spanish Valley made it clear they weren't really interested in being an advisory body or a steering committee to us, but what they just desperately would like is if we're just better at like coordinating as all 3 agencies. So the recommendation that we came up with is that we keep it kind of relatively informal and at the staff level, like staffed by, or the board member would be like public works director, city manager, and just meeting quarterly or something like that and just doing some information sharing. So that is our recommendation. Just wanted to update you on that. If you have any thoughts or differences of opinion, we're happy to hear it, but that's what we came up with. Great.
Sounds great. Thanks for that update, Carly. And Joel, was there anything else that you wanted to share?
I just wanted to say to the governor and to the BLM, thank you for removing the leasing sites off of the trail. The city sent letters thanking those individuals for that action this week.
Thank you, Joel. All right, we are now in section 7, citizens to be heard. Wes Shannon. I should mention that if you want to be heard, it's a blue form. We also do have a public hearing tonight, and that would be the pink form, and their forms are outside. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Wes Shannon. I own the Love Muffin Cafe and LaSalle House Restaurant, both located on Main Street. I take it most of you read my letters. I sent a couple letters to the council. I'm just going to read off of that. I just wanted to get some FaceTime with you guys, and you could hear it straight from me. But I've been trying to gather as much information on the hotspot money and the projects that are proposed. But one thing sticks in my mind that was brought up at the council meeting about Main Street parking being taken away by UDOT. The question was asked, can UDOT take away Main Street parking? And the answer was yes. What's strange about this is the topic was brought up a couple years ago with some resistance from the community. So with $10 million on the line, we're going to take a chance and hope that Main Street parking is not killed. And I just want to put that in perspective for us, having 2 businesses on Main Street. We're essentially transplanting Main Street and Main Street parking into someone's lap on 100 West. What about all the rest of the businesses on Main Street? It seems there could be a more logical way to use the money and benefit a broader scope. If there's even a 1% chance that parking on Main Street could be taken away, I feel like we need to direct this money into a more viable option that encompasses a plan for the community rather than an isolated parking structure for the entire downtown corridor. And that's all I wanted to say, really. So it's just concerning, just the direction we're going. I just wanted to voice my opinion on that. So that's all I had. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Wes. Elizabeth Boone?
To work.
Once it'll sit there and flash for a minute. When it stops flashing, it's ready.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening regarding the upcoming agenda item 10.2, the recommendation to amend the workforce housing. My name's Elizabeth Boone. I'm with Reynolds Ash & Associates. I'm the architect working on the Henry Shaw Hotel. We've been working on the site plan application with city staff since 2015. So in that time period, the workforce housing ordinance passed, and we've been working with them to come up with a solution for how to include workforce housing as part of our site plan application. Last year,
I think you might have to, you downloaded it yet.
oh no.
Sorry. It's okay. Go here, let's try this out. Click share, here we go. Okay. Our council member can't hear you. And it should download, and then it should go red, right?
It'll
And
go
then you press
solid
it.
when it's
It'll go
ready.
solid, and then you do it. It just takes a minute.
That looks like it's
There it
working.
goes.
Ronnie, the person that is
There, it's
citizens
ready.
to be heard, has a something she's trying to pull up on the screen for us.
Gotta get
And
the puck
is that
going.
something that you can make available to us?
So if you push
By
that button,
emailing?
there, it should go.
There you
Yes,
go.
I've shared it with Nora and Corey. So I'm sure
Nora,
they
can you forward it to us? In fact, if you email it right now, it might be something that Ronnie can look at as well.
So last year, we shared with staff our idea for integration of how the workforce housing could be included in our hotel design. And the staff were really excited about the idea, but unfortunately it was non-compliant. However, staff recommended that an amendment to the ordinance should be considered due to the fact that to date, all developers have opted to pay the fee in lieu of rather than build the workforce housing on the property. And so we agreed to run the site plan application in tandem with the amendment to this ordinance and to be available to you all to speak to why we feel an amendment is needed in order to make the ordinance more possible for builders. So what I'd like to do today is go through the ordinance, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, and just talk about the impacts on our project and some modifications that we see that could be helpful. So starting with the definition of unit, the ordinance defines unit as a residential dwelling containing a kitchen, sink, stove, counter, refrigerator, countertops, cabinets, a bathroom, sink, toilet, shower, bathtub, bedroom or sleeping area, living room or area, and then parking and storage space. There is an option for developers to pay a fee rather than build the units on site. And so that fee is calculated based on the square footage of the project, and our hotel square footage is about 1,300 square feet, or, 1,300 square feet, times the 113,000 square feet, times $15.57 per square foot. So that's a total fee of $1.75 million, which I'll get back to a little bit later. The construction requirement for workforce housing reads that a factor is determined by dividing the finished floor area by the floor area factor and multiplying the result by the AH unit mitigation number for the type of housing to be constructed. So looking at this hotel motel category that we fall under, our project gross square footage is 113,000 square feet minus about 5,000 square feet of workforce housing equals 108,000 square feet of hotel. This 108,000 square feet of hotel divided by the floor area factor of 60,000 square feet gives you a 1.8 floor area factor. This 1.8 floor area factor is then multiplied by the unit mitigation factor to determine how many units are required within each income bracket. So the minimum we see is 10 units, and the maximum would be 412 units. The next section that impacts the amount of workforce housing required is regarding the square footage of each unit. So the area of affordable housing units to be built shall be an average of not less than 1,000 square foot per unit. So when you factor that out based on the unit quantities that were required in the last slide, we end up with a range of 9,700 square feet all the way up to 412,000 square feet. Our project is targeting something in the middle. So we're looking at this income, very low income bracket that would require us to build 11,000 square feet.
Mayor, do we not have a time?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. So usually for citizens to be heard, we give 3 minutes.
Okay.
It feels a little out of scope, just that I didn't realize that there was a presentation part of your comment, but.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
Almost done.
Thank you.
So looking at the cost of this construction, we've estimated that we could construct this for about $250 a square foot. That construction cost is $2.75 million. There was a planning commissioner that felt that they could construct it for $180 a square foot. I'm sure my client would love to hire this gentleman, but even that factor is $1.87 million construction cost. So you can see that both of those numbers are higher than the fee in lieu of. So there's really no incentive for the developer to build this on their property when paying the fee is ultimately less hassle and a faster way to a finished product.
But it's also not carrying the equity.
Right.
Yeah.
So why is this beneficial? This is beneficial to the city of Moab because we're able to provide units deed restricted for 50 years at rents of around $450. And so I had another item to share regarding our proposal, but maybe I'll be quick. I wanted to share, Planning Commission really found a sticking point with how to propose this reduction in a way that would incentivize developers to build. And so we feel that the text amendment that they've proposed to the ordinance is helpful, but there also needs to be consideration given to the minimum square footage, the average square footage per unit, so that it is lower than the 1,000 square foot per unit. My understanding from the meeting minutes when the ordinance was passed is that 1,000 square foot was not a well-considered unit size. It was simply ease of calculation. And so I would encourage you all to consider what is an acceptable minimum. And I wanted to share today just a few project samples that are within the range that we're proposing, which is about 400 square foot per unit. A lot of these are for sale and have sold well. And this is actually the unit that we're proposing for the Henry Shaw. I'm happy to talk about this more. But we really feel like this is the solution in order to create incentives for developers to build these on their property.
Thank you for your comments, and definitely make your presentation that you did here available for us, if you don't mind. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other citizens to be heard tonight? Then we will move on. We are now at our public hearing. 8.1, public hearing, proposed resolution number 11, 2020, a resolution amending the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. We don't have a presentation planned before we open for this public hearing. Rachel is here to answer any questions if anyone on the council does have questions before.
I'm good.
Good? Okay, so I'll now open the public hearing. If you'd like to be heard, this is the form that you'd fill out. I don't currently have any forms filled out. Going once. Going twice. Okay, I am comfortable with a motion to close our public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Kaylin.
Second.
Thanks, Tawny. Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call. So, sorry about that. So Kaylin,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Tawny,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Public hearing is closed. We are in section 9, old business. 9.1, update and discussion of hotspot funding and additional transportation projects. So this is a discussion item for us to have in response to questions and comments and emails that have been going around regarding the hotspot funding. And I thought it would be important for us to take a minute to outline all the other stuff that's been happening, including the downtown transportation hub planning. So what you see on the agenda as attachments, those were my attempt at capturing things that have been worked on to date. So what I'd like to do is just go through them, and we can certainly have any discussion on any one of these items. But starting with Emma, and Ronnie, you had the question why were two different Emma maps presented. Basically what we're presenting are maps that have been generated to in discussions that we've had regarding hotspot dispersed parking projects. So the reason why there's one with Maxine developed and one without Maxine developed was because when we gave the go-ahead for staff to reach out to UDOT for the consideration of using hotspot funding to develop some parking in the Emma Boulevard area, the original map that we looked at had Maxine developed, but I was concerned there'd be confusion that Maxine parking improvements, those Maxine parking improvements would be included in what you all thought might be hotspot funding, which it would not be. So if that's clear, hopefully that makes sense why there are two maps in front of us. I think that there were a lot of questions about conversations that have been had regarding the, because, we've been hearing from businesses in the North Main Street area, business area, that they're hoping to see, and, I personally had a meeting almost a year ago with business owners saying, I would do what I could and work diligently to see, and others, and city staff, to make sure that we had some kind of parking available as they were the businesses that were going to be affected by a loss of parking on Main Street. And so basically, what was put forward was an effort to first look at spending the dispersed parking hotspot funding to work with those property owners north of Main Street to really deal with that loss of on-street parking as a result of the highway widening project. So those are the two working ideas for spending dispersed funding. And yeah, so I don't know, I don't know what more we should talk about in terms of the efforts to create these drawings. But Joel, I thought that it might be really important to be, because there was a question of transparency, and I thought that it would be important for us to share in a public meeting just why we were looking at developing parking on the streets and not in collaboration with any of the property owners in this vicinity.
Yeah, we can address that. The plan that's there now is kind of a plan of last resort. City staff reached out to 3 of the churches that are located in that area and attempted to enter into leasing agreements for the property over a 20-year period that would allow us to pave out some of the parking lots that are off of the road, and then the city's development of the road wouldn't be included in that, obviously. So, but we got told no from 2 of the groups, and we entered into negotiations with another group.
What group was that we
The
started
church,
to?
the Church of Christ.
Can you show that on the map? It's not going to be on one of the Emma maps, but maybe if we look at Google Maps.
And so we initially tried to work with the Church of Christ in order to pave out that under a leasing agreement that would have been over a 20-year period.
Hold on just one sec. I would love
Yeah.
for this just to get pulled up so that it's absolutely clear who you talked to and where that church is located.
Okay.
Is it the internet?
It's the wireless, I think. It's just a little slower than plugged in. It should be up in a second. It's been slow all day.
If you put it on the comm, it tends to, the comm key's slower down here.
Here we go. The globe is still there.
That's fun.
The center of the universe.
So just to be super duper totally clear, the property that we've really focused on creating an agreement with
Yeah.
is this parcel right here.
I want to be clear, it wasn't that we focused on that parcel, it was that was the one church that said, we're willing to talk to you about it. The other church told us point blank, no. The other church told us, we're probably not interested, we're not really interested in even taking it to our group. Whereas the Church of Christ came forward and said, no, we're willing to talk to you. So it wasn't that the city selected that site, it was through the natural selection of, as we transitioned out, that it became that site. We talked about removing the dirt and expanding that area and paving out that area. And then the church came back to us and told us that they had some concerns about safety, overnight parking, Sunday service issues. We went through a second round of negotiations.
Let's be really clear with we too. So just that it's really clear what staff, which staff, because I think Ronnie had some questions that she was asking with respect to that. So.
Okay. In the meeting I was in, it was myself, Chuck, and Bill Jackson who represented the Church of Christ. We talked about that we would gate off the area, put up cameras. In the agreement, it would be clear that the Sunday service Sunday would be solely for the church use, that if they had events like a wedding or a funeral or something they needed the church during the week, that if they let us know, then obviously we could close off the gates and make sure that it was only available to the church on those events. It was then told to us at that point that the church wasn't interested in entering into an agreement with the city. So that's when we started looking to figure out how to put some parking out onto the roadway and into the public space, because we couldn't. Obviously, we'd prefer to put it on one of the church properties because we can get so much bang for our buck compared to the number of spots we can get out into the public right of way. The city's not opposed still at this point to talking to any of these groups. In fact, it's my understanding that the church on the far end there, I can't remember which church that is. No, the one at the top.
This one?
Nope, up. Keith's, but I can't remember the name.
Community church.
Community church. Keith has reached back out, and we've actually started talking to that church at this point again about some possibilities of how what was proposed at the last meeting could be changed going forward too. And so we've re-entered into negotiations with them, trying to get that to work. We'd be more than happy to talk to the Baptist Church or the Church of Christ or any of them to try and get a space of parking if any of them wanted to make that available, because we can get so much more out of our parking, our spending, if we have a lot versus street parking. And as you can see, what we've proposed is we're essentially making one of our public right-of-ways a parking lot to try and balance that out.
And the reason why, scroll up just a sec. So, yeah, the reason why, actually go to the map. That is in our packet, the attachment that was in our packet. And thanks for being the toggler there.
You bet.
Scroll up and out. Sorry. And Ronnie, I'm sorry that you're not able to see this in real time, but so basically the reason why it was, why looking at Emma versus Maxine to close it off was that we had talked in our meetings prior about closing Emma for through traffic, and that was decided on by this council. So then the next step was to draft this out. And so anyway, hopefully that answers a lot of questions that have been put out there. But I think, what other questions do people have on this council? Does this council have about the process that staff went through to come up with these drawings that are before us for hotspot funding consideration and dispersed parking?
Mayor, it was my understanding at one time, a week ago, that you were going to schedule a public hearing with all the stakeholders for the next regular council meeting. Is that correct? Is that still on?
Yes, but not a public hearing.
Not a public hearing. Okay,
So-
but all the stakeholders. So I'm just wondering.
And let me be clear, because, so there are two levels of stakeholder for this project area. Number one is the businesses that are losing on-site parking directly. And
On
then-
street,
What did I say?
on site.
Oh, thank you. Is it on-site, on-street parking. And so then from there, it's like the bigger area is like the larger group of stakeholders. But of the, we've focused and concentrated conversations with the businesses that were gonna be most affected by the 191 widening. But yes, so the idea, the working idea, and I think what we're planning on is having a workshop
Thank you.
on Wednesday, March 10th. Sorry, is that Tuesday? Tuesday, March 10th?
The 10th is Tuesday.
Correct, Joel? Is that what we said? So we had a meeting with that stakeholder level, those directly impacted by the loss of parking on 191. And specifically on the west side of 191 or southwest. And at that meeting, and myself, you were there, Kaylin was there, Joel was there, those stakeholders were there. We determined two things. One was that we were going to have this workshop and that we'd be inviting everybody else, which was the plan. And then two was that we would go ahead and do some basic dirt work to improve parking on the Maxine Road. Remember?
Yeah.
You remember that?
And update, that was Monday on President's Day we met, and then Tuesday we instructed staff to do the dirt work, and it was Thursday last week, I think that was done and completed to a standard that would temporarily work for, I think it was like 4 additional parking places in the interim.
And at that meeting that we had with those stakeholders, those were the two things follow-up things that we had talked about doing. And part of improving those few parking spots on Maxine gives us a better idea as a council of whether or not we want to spend additional funding to create more parking, or if that's a workable solution for some additional parking in that area. So that's good news that that work was done so quickly. And yeah, so where we are now is after our meeting on Tuesday with the stakeholders, I think we'll have a better idea of what we'll bring back to council for a final decision about those dispersed parking funds, right?
Yeah, and so while we're letting each other know what's going on, Chuck and I did have a meeting with Pastor Keith and his head of maintenance on the Tuesday following that President's Day meeting, and got their perspective, and it sounds like presuming he's available, he can express it directly, but they were supportive of that Emma Boulevard parking. They said that it would help them with some of the challenges that they experience in that area. And they were also supportive of improvements to Maxine. And we discussed that it could be, short of paving, there was different options for what sort of surface treatment to use. And so what does 50,000 buy us?
Could get us a chip seal over road base and striping.
And then the plan.
Which would be sufficient for chip seals, life 5 to 7 years. So,
Okay.
as opposed to, 3 inches of paving.
Well, if Maxine were here, she would tell us, pave that sucker and go on about your business. In her lovely Texas drawl.
And then just to further clarify too, when we're looking at this map, the orange between the east and west North Emma, yep, right there. The orange along the bike path, that whole strip, and then the orange along the bike path up there as well, where it's connecting to 191. All of that intends to be developed with plants and shade and
It's a park strip.
park strip.
As we think about sidewalks in the city areas for vegetation of that. And this one on this location here would be also a detention basin with plants, detention/retention basin to take care of drainage. The widening project's gonna take care of a lot of the drainage problems that come across the highway now, but still there'll be drainage issues. So this would close the road off as well as do landscaping as well as be a retention.
And if we wanted more improvements to that area, like a bike wash, well, I don't know if we do a bike wash station, but, because that would be water. But one thing that Ronnie talked about, and Ronnie, jump in at any time, was that we would be also introducing community benefit with this area. So I think that it's a good time for any one of us to step up with additional suggestions or amendments to this plan before us if we want to include more things to it.
You could put a water stop in there.
What does that mean? A water
A
stop?
drinking fountain. Because we're gonna have this, once the highway's done, you asked, I mean.
Yeah.
So this will be the hot crossing right here.
Uh-huh.
And it just seems like many hot days coming across, even though your water bottle and your maybe getting empty, this would potentially be a location for a water faucet, a water stop, place for people to, doesn't have to be powered with electricity, but just as an idea.
There's a water fountain?
Yeah.
That would just be turned off in the winter.
Yeah, but like we turn off our other ones.
That'd be
Part of our
pretty
new
awesome.
maintenance.
So just to clarify, Chuck, you said that they had done the dirt work there on Maxine. Are people parking there now?
That was the idea when we did it, was there's a telephone pole that said it's kind of in the way, but there was big dirt mounds and there was a lot of vegetation, so it wasn't eligible to be used for parking. You can kind of see it there. It was a berm, it wasn't flat at all. So we just went in and flattened that all out. And if you look down the street, there's the sidewalk and curb, and we just kind of built a berm that was in line with that curb to stop floodwaters or water from running down into the church there, the Baptist church. And so we made it about 3 or 4 additional parking spots around that turn. It's not the greatest situation, but it's more for now, and until we can get a decision on what to do going forward, we were just trying to, give a little bit of a Band-Aid to try and fill some parking issues for now.
But there's not any signage or anything there that indicates okay.
And we zoom out because I think it's important for us to really understand that parking that's there, and then the parking, if you go down Emma a little ways, can you put the cursor over that like shed that's just that one right there? So like right there, there's a trail from that shed to the back of Poison Spider and the Maverick. And people that are parking in that area walk that little trail.
And every kid that lives on that side of town walks up to get to Maverick.
Yeah.
That's how you get to the candy shop right there.
Yeah. So that's on the Church of Christ property. And yet like it's there, and improvements to parking in that area have been made. Have been planned for in that Emma Boulevard development.
And for clarity, the concept plan that we put together for the Church of Christ property had a sidewalk going along there over to the Maverick.
And if the church wanted to consider that, we would be open to that, but the church...
Oh, we would much prefer to do a parking lot than what we're proposing. We can get more spots out of what we're trying to do. We're still open to any one of these groups if they want. We're more than happy to work with any one of these groups to get a parking lot. I'd much rather do a parking lot than parking on a street.
Otherwise, we're with the existing, 2 attachments that we have in our packet for tonight for consideration.
So Emily, just to be very clear, it is not, it's not an easement that, basically people are using it.
Currently, yes.
Legally.
Currently, yes, it's not an easement, and the lawyer side of me could argue that it's been going on for 30, 40 years, and so potentially there is an easement there, but there's not one that's documented and recorded. And so when we were doing our negotiations with them, a part of the leasing agreement would have been there to have been a path there.
And so, absent of the Church of Christ being willing to solidify any kind of easement, it makes it very difficult to feel good about parking improvements that literally, if that were to be closed, would be so far away from Main Street businesses of that area. So
the negotiation we were in with them, it would have been closed Sunday mornings for sure. During Sunday service, it would have been available for church use, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or whatever the request was. And obviously there would have been 5 to 10 days a year when it would have been closed as well for a funeral service or a wedding or some other event that the congregation was holding.
So I'm wondering if it might, I'm not clear if this has happened, but to segregate the parking lot from the potential easement, because it seems like even if only an easement could be negotiated for public use, that could be of benefit. Because the intention is to, at some point, improve Emma and have on-street parking there, and so to make that as useful as possible to those Main Street businesses. And it seems like the city might have a role to play in negotiating on behalf of the public in that respect.
We could also negotiate with the property owners on the other side of that line. Those are the Red Rock partners for easement as well. But I think the point is that we're going to invite everybody to the workshop that we're going to have in 2 weeks, and we'll see who shows up and who's willing to talk easement, if at all. So that's where we are with Emma.
Actually, I was going to suggest about 15 minutes ago that we terminate this discussion, because the definitive discussion will happen with all the stakeholders present, including the churches, I certainly hope. And this easement that we're talking about is a critical issue, in addition to the parking, which has not really been discussed. And hopefully this can be resolved at the workshop, I hope.
But if the church and Red Rock Partners say they're not willing to enter into a negotiation where you know, we can't badger them either. Like, we have to be respectful of receiving a no, and we have to be okay with that. So between now and 2 weeks from now, I would suggest, you know, reaching out or sharing this meeting with people that, you know, those people, and see if they're, you know, and we'll be reaching out to them for the workshop meeting as well.
And conversely, church leadership may give favorable signals, and then their congregation decide that they don't want to pursue something. So,
And that was my understanding as to what happened kind of last time as
Right.
we met with Bill. It seemed like we were making good progress and thought we were really, I thought we were getting it done. And then when we heard back from Bill, it was the congregation had declined the
right.
option.
So while a stakeholder workshop may help everyone get on the same page, that it may not all get hammered out at one meeting.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
I think-
reality.
And I think it's important too that, like, a design was presented, a redesign, a actual contract was presented, there was deliberation, and then there was a no. So it wasn't like, you know, hey, you interested? Oh, no, okay, cool. It was like formal meetings that occurred.
And happy to do them again and happy to meet with the congregation
Yeah.
if that would help, like whatever steps we can do to push it through.
So are there any other comments or questions regarding where we are with the Emma and North area parking? Ronnie, do you have questions?
This is Ronnie. I'll just make some comments because I didn't know if I should say them to the end, but maybe they make more sense to make now.
Yeah, go for it. I think we're there, yeah. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep,
Hello?
we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello?
She can't hear us, but, I mean, she could right up until that moment. Maybe, I didn't hit mute or anything. I don't know what to.
Can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened.
So I have some comments to make, and some of them could probably wait until later, but on the Emma issue, I mean, one of the problems that I've experienced from the community end is just so many of these meetings have happened in smaller groups or without any recordings or minutes, and then there are misunderstandings, and there's no record to review what was discussed and what was agreed upon, and I just really think it would behoove the community moving forward if these meetings are public, if they're recorded, if they're minutes, if they're sent out to stakeholders afterwards, so that if someone had a misunderstanding, that it can be rectified quickly, because that's just a recurrent problem that I'm experiencing. And random things like it's great that dirt was cleared the other day, but once again, the city failed to communicate with businesses. So I got a call from one freaking out because dirt was moving and they didn't exactly know why. And again, I don't know how we're failing to just give people a heads up that
Ronnie,
we're coming to do
can
that.
can we talk about that, please? Because I think that this is important communication for us to have, and we are in a public meeting. So, Joel, do you want to respond to that accusation?
I don't know that it was an accusation. I'll just say we met on Monday and with the community that was there, and it was Monday that it was requested that we would pave that, smooth that dirt area out and make parking stalls there. And it was my verbal commitment to that group at that time that it was a holiday Monday, but on Tuesday morning I would meet with my guys first thing in the morning and give them direction to do it, and that it wouldn't be done probably Tuesday or Wednesday, but by the end of the week. And so Tuesday morning, as I had indicated, I went and met with my streets department and told them that morning, first thing at 8 a.m., to follow through with that process. And so Thursday, they started moving the dirt. So I guess, I don't want to say in my defense, but I didn't reach out to tell them we were doing that because I had told them Monday that's what I was doing. And so I didn't realize that within a 24-hour turnaround, I needed to reestablish that connection, and within a 48-hour turnaround, tell them that I was following through with what I told them I would do. So, and that's on me. I mean, I guess those windows in my mind were small enough that the action was preceding the conversation we had just had, when those who were at the meeting, that had been a far enough period that I needed to reestablish the connection, and in the future I'll do that.
Kaylin, what was your understanding? Because you were at that meeting as well. Was your understanding that the city was going to move forward with doing some basic improvements of Maxine as an action item?
I was, since I had the meeting on Tuesday, I wasn't clear if, and there was some time before the tourist busy season, I didn't know if we were going to, if the city was going to pursue a more substantial surface treatment or just scrape it flat. And frankly, after our meeting, I wasn't clear on if there was a way to delineate the parking without doing an additional surface treatment. But the city does all sorts of road work without consulting with me or the council. So I'm confused.
Well, like I said, if I had it to do over again, I'd have called them, and in the future I will. So I'll just make sure that even if it's been a day or two, I'll just follow through and reestablish connection before we make any action.
I will add this. I got a call from Scott Newton about the time you were moving dirt. He was delighted that you were creating a little extra parking for him. It doesn't resolve the main problem, which is the lack of an easement, but at least it was a gesture on the part of the city, and he was pleased. I can say that.
But Ronnie, you received a call that from somebody not happy?
Emily, can we move forward?
Well, I'm trying to give Ronnie the opportunity to say.
I think her point is that we need to be better about communication, and this has been an ongoing thing since I've been in council, and so I would support what Ronnie's saying, that if we're gonna have these discussions about taking parking away, like on 100 West, when we get information from the flower shop that they weren't aware of their parking being taken, and I mean, it's the same story over and over. So like if we can get clear that we need to be better about communication, then let's do that.
And I think that we hear that, and I think we can get better at it.
Thank you, Joel.
So we'll take care of it.
I'm getting a lot of garbled sound, so I think I'm just going to watch the rest of the meeting, and I'll make the comments that I need to make at the following meeting. But I will say about the March 10th workshop that, I mean, I've submitted multiple times now comments that I feel like I get comments from people who are concerned, like the churches, or we have gotten comments from the public, and it gets very confusing. Like, are we really just talking about 3 businesses on Main Street that lost parking, or should we have been talking to people too? Like, I mean, we know that Hampton put in more parking in part because people couldn't park long vehicles anymore on the highway. So I just, in my mind, a stakeholders workshop, I mean, this potentially can affect a lot of people just in terms of traffic flow. And we know from the beginning that the school was concerned. And we're talking tonight about what the churches may or may not want, but again, they're not in the room. So I would just really encourage, and nobody has to agree with me, but I really think the model for good consultation and collaboration and communication for the workshop would be to cast your net wide and include not just 3 businesses or whatever it is, but the other ones, because I mean, there are probably more people losing parking. We know some on the east side did too. But really, what's being contemplated for Emma and Maxine does have repercussions for the residents of the apartments on Emma and the churches and the school as well. And I have other things, but I'm just getting a certain percentage of garbled stuff I can't hear very well, and I don't think it's responsible for me to stay on and make comments when I probably can't really hear completely what's being said. So I'll just save anything else I have for a meeting when I'm physically present.
Okay. Shall we move on then from Emma?
So I'll sign off then, yeah, and you guys can reflect in the minutes, but whatever time it is.
Okay. Thanks for calling in, Ronnie.
Yep.
I think that her points are well made, Mayor, and I think that we will, as a staff, meet in the morning, and we'll make sure that the workshops are well advertised, that the word's out on Facebook, that the email list is used, and that everyone on the north and south, east, and west of this area will all get word, and that the meeting going forward on the 10th will be recorded and documented, and that everyone will have access to that, and we can broadcast it, and I think that our points are well heard, and we'll move forward with them.
And we're going to publicly notice it as a city council workshop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well then, moving on to the second item in this agenda item. So the 100 South and Main Street West parking lot redevelopment. So I've been in conversation with Mike Stoy. He is the managing member of the trust for his family. He runs the storage units that are currently there. And I put this in front of him for consideration from him and his family. And he has come back with the statement that at this time, his mother is still not interested in doing any improvements on their property. There is an easement along the south where those parking spots are. Thanks, Chuck. So there is an easement there that we could look at paving, and we could look at paving and maybe not delineating in the way that it's delineated now with the turnaround, because that would probably not be needed, but working with the property owners where this lot sits behind to look at developing more structured parking in that area with the use of hotspot funding, which has been of interest to property owners. So I don't know if you all have questions about that, but as it stands, Mike is saying he's not ready yet to commit to this. And just to show where the property lines end, you can kind of see it. I'll just point to it here. So their property line comes over and down and this way. So that's the property line there, and the rest are easements. So that businesses have access. So it was kind of critical to first hear from him if he was interested. So that dispersed parking area is a little bit on hold, except that we can pull together all of the businesses here and see if they want to collaborate about doing some structured parking there. And anybody that's driven there and parked there knows that it's full of potholes and dirt, so some improvement might be nice. Comments or questions?
If it got improved as the stalls are delineated here, it seems like because there's no stalling, people are actually kind of efficient about utilizing it. It can be a little chaotic figuring out what exactly is going on, but it seems like people manage.
But if we were to level and kind of pave at where people currently park instead of around the perimeter, that could be helpful and be more efficient. Like more cars might be able to park in that area. So, so that's another area. Next is the lot between Center Street and 100 North behind the post office. So this is a drawing that was taken from the original hotspot funding. It's complicated. This one's probably one of the more complicated because it includes working with a post office. But this is kind of next up for conversation about getting organized around dispersed parking and using hotspot funding to do it. This, I think the goal for this is to create a working group of the businesses that would be, directly adjacent to these parking areas and the owners. So it's Wells Fargo, it's the post office, the Times Independent, and those Main Street businesses. getting them all together. This is the biggest, heaviest lift, but would also have such a really positive impact for off Main Street parking. I think we've just been first focused on getting the, businesses losing Main north of town, getting parking situated there. So there's that plan.
So Chuck, the lot that is on my right, that's closer to First East, would,
This one?
yes, yes,
That one? Yeah,
my
that's-
right,
Oh, you're right.
my right, other right. Is that one entered from 100 East, kind of diagonal from the courthouse?
So this drawing was from the original hotspot, and that was behind the Forest Service property. They've indicated that they're not interested, and so that area there is not really being considered unless we have to renegotiate or re-talk to the Forest Service to see if they'd be
okay.
willing to. So we're more focused on this one. Well, at least it's being provided more so for the post office, the alleyway, and the Wells Fargo First Security area that's there.
Okay, all right, I just wondered.
So and the agreements that, for instance, that Wells Fargo has with other businesses leasing spots, how does that play into?
There's all sorts of hurdles that this one would take, but it could be, through the negotiation, you would have to address some of the easement issues that are along the backside, and then you would also have to address some of the spaces that are preserved for each business, and then some of the businesses there, it's their only parking, and so you'd probably have to enter into agreement that some spots were reserved for businesses that currently are parking on their private property, so those spots would become reserved for that business as well. So you would probably have, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 15 spots that were potentially reserved, depending on what those numbers are. But until we, get the go-ahead to really dig into these ones, I don't know what those numbers are yet.
Well, it looks like by combining those two lots, you gain some efficiency for sure.
I think it adds obviously to the parking benefit, but I think what it does for the city is right now that alleyway is a mess, and if you look at Chuck, if you look at the property lines, it's a big mess over like who even has easements and doesn't have right-of-ways, and as you can see, like there's parts of that road we don't even have right-of-ways, and so there's issues with who's maintaining it. We get complaints as the city that the alleyway needs repaved, which our response is it's not our alleyway. So it would just clean up this whole area that has historically just had a lot of lot line problems.
We could, part of it would be with the post office where they currently have the drive up and drop off post boxes. Talking with them about moving those. And then, opening up the parking areas, grading it out and opening it up as one big parking area with access from several points. So there's that dispersed parking area. Let's see what's next. I wanted to show this East 100 South. So we've been talking a lot about creating parking for RVs. And so I worked with the engineering department to come up with a concept design where we could utilize this area of 100 East to park RVs. I've got a meeting scheduled with the property owners of the Best Western, as they actually have easement into halfway into the street. We are gonna have a meeting that's basically one property owner to meet with, but I will open up to the property to the right as well, the Rustic, the owner of the Rustic, to put this in front of them as well. The good thing about this is that it could be a way to mimic the existing only other RV parking that we have in town, which is at the MIC. So can you show the MIC parking on the Google Earth. So right now in the city, the only like dedicated RV parking is right here. And there aren't many spaces. And so it would be another place where we could have some RV parking. Ultimately, a parking app is, a goal that I have to really help us get organized, help people have a safe place to land, regardless of what kind of vehicle they're driving. So that's that concept of dispersed parking that could use some of that hotspot funding. But again, like, because it's parking on a street, we wouldn't have to enter into any lease agreements, and we could move forward with some basic improvements that probably wouldn't cost a whole heck of a lot. And remember too that this area is under, Chuck, help me out here. So it's part of a,
It's the 100 South Green Infrastructure Project.
yeah.
So under that project, this would become a cul-de-sac. And we were going to put in some bioswales, et cetera, as part of taking care of the storm drain, because that was the beginning of that project, was a storm drain project. It also takes care of road issues and other utility issues. So ultimately, that's what this plan would have been, to put a cul-de-sac down in here. And that's, the access to the bike skills park and to the future restroom.
So we could still do a cul-de-sac, have a restroom, do bioswales.
Yeah, I think a cul-de-sac would actually be important to make this RV parking work.
Well, because the action of the RV would be like drive in, park, pull out, and then leave.
Could be.
So Chuck, because this is it appears to be a cul-de-sac, would it be eligible for hotspot funding use? Do you have any sense of that?
I haven't asked UDOT about this one, but I think the same argument we could make for Emma Boulevard, the same thing here. This isn't asking them to pave one of our roads for through connectivity. This is just a dedicated parking area because, and I mean, I think it's pretty clear that this will never be a through road across the park because the right-of-way has been traded out already for the parkway. That was the previous, this right-of-way was acquired by trading for this right-of-way. So, yeah, I would think that if UDOT's amenable to the Emma scenario, that this would be a very similar scenario. But we haven't asked them that yet on this one.
And then what else? So those are the dispersed parking concepts currently being, worked and pursued in some fashion at some level. And I thought it was important to go through those as, that's been a question that's been on everyone's mind too, of like, and that was a question that Ronnie asked. What conversations have been happening with property owners regarding the use of these funds?
One other question, Chuck. I think Michael Liss, among others, had at one time shown a plan involving Bob Hines' property over, what would be just east of the Mick parking. And we haven't talked about any of his property. I'm not sure why not, or if we should, for that matter. I just don't know.
I'm not that familiar with his presentation.
Yeah, I don't have it with me.
He had some spots located on the map, but
Okay, but you're not familiar with it anyway, so, okay, thank you.
Is that just buying his property and then putting parking there?
Yeah, that would be the idea, but whether it would be suitable or not, I have no idea. I just saw the property because somebody, Michael asked me about that the other day, and I went, I don't know. But he had it in one of his plans, for what it's worth.
So,
Emma, may I ask, Mayor? So I saw an email that you showed that there's about $2.6 million in dispersed parking funds. Where did that come from all of a sudden?
well, So I talked to Chuck about this earlier today, and in our original agreement with UDOT, and that's a really good question. So our original agreement with UDOT was that we had the 7.3 for the parking structure, 1.7 for dispersed parking, and then 1 million for Main Street improvements. And then the 1 million of Main Street improvements was essentially looked at as possibly being used by the,
So if I can show you a slide from that, that'll maybe answer your question. If you just give me a second.
when we signed the agreement with UDOT, it was for the 8.3 million, for up to 8.3 million.
Yeah, this is the slide that we showed last week at the joint council and DAC meeting. So this is the, let me go back one.
But with
That was
the,
good.
with-
Wait, go back.
yeah.
Yeah, show us that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I'm not going to the whole PowerPoint, I was just getting to that one.
yeah.
So this was the Transportation Commission meeting agenda item fact sheet. It had Moab area, 10 million, the downtown parking structure, 7.3, and the dispersed parking plan, surface lots, 2.7. But I think that as UDOT, and you know, Monty's here and Ryan's here, if they want to clarify, if you want them to, I'm sure they could, but I think what happened is that was what the agenda item was, this fact sheet for that meeting. And then when they actually did the final distribution, it was 7.3 for the parking structure, 1 million for the Main Street improvements, which was another project on the hotspot funding list, and 1.7 million for dispersed parking.
But that 7.3 doesn't include the $856,000 for Kimley Horn.
It does.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, if it stays at 7.3, yeah. But our contract, our cooperative agreement with UDOT says we could spend up to 8.3 million. So they took if you recall, that was a question that council asked when we negotiated that agreement was, are we forced to take parking off of Main Street? The answer was, no, you're not at this point in time, forced to. Because they wanted it, you guys wanted it in writing, and you got it in writing from UDOT.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the agreement for the parking structure is 8.3 million could be spent currently.
But then if we go up to 8.3, we're taking 1 million away from what we could otherwise use for dispersed parking and Main Street improvements, right?
Main Street improvements, absolutely, yes.
So, or sorry, Main Street improvements, because the dispersed is the 2.7.
Well, it actually, I think as they refined it, it became 7.3 for the parking structure, 1 million for Main Street improvements, and 1.7 for the dispersed parking.
But we got up to 8.3 for the parking structure.
Because that's what's in the cooperative agreement that says we can spend up to 8.3.
But we're in the design review right now, and so if we say we don't want to go past 7.3, we might,
Well, I'm looking at
decrease the scope.
this presentation. I mean, what are we eliminating? Because the meetings that I was at, I mean, you actually, and is this correct, Joel, that Chuck came to you asking if we could take the 1.7 for dispersed parking to use for the parking structure?
Yeah, at one point that was a part of the discussion. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just curious how we got from close to 10 million bucks for a parking structure, and now what has been cut to get it to 7.3?
Are we talking parking structure now or dispersed parking?
Parking structure. The downtown parking structure.
I never said it was 10 million. The newspaper put a retraction in that said I said it was up to 9 million. The 7.3 million was in this. We should look at this, maybe, since you didn't see it because you weren't at the meeting. I'm trying to get to the slide. Base cost. is somewhere between 6.8 million and 7.5 million. That's to have a functional parking garage. All along, the discussion with council was, do we want to have sustainability features? What level of sustainability features can we afford? What are those? As well as what level of aesthetics do we want to put into the parking structure? So that's the reason why we wanted to find out how much funding was available to see if we wanted to build on to add more sustainability features, like larger commitment of solar panels. Because the contract, if you recall, says that you can have up to $500,000 for solar panels on the structure.
And aesthetics can be up to $500,000.
Yeah, structural aesthetics, I think we call it. So these are the base cost right there for the current design. The whole reason to talk about budget and how much money was available was so the Design Advisory Committee could help us get closer to what the recommendation would be to council. Hey, council, if you got if you want to have this level of sustainability features and this level of architectural aesthetics, you need more. You might need more money, so you can make those fundamental decisions. That's why it was. This presentation is right there. It's the base cost.
So 250, could I just to be clear, just because I watched the presentation, so 32 of those are already accounted for, correct? Because Red Desert Investments has an easement for 32 of those parking.
I think it's Utah Desert Investments. I think that's what it is.
We have a parking credit.
They have a parking
It's not
credit
an
of
easement,
32
but it's a
stalls.
credit.
So they,
Which actually, that's a good point. So also in our agenda, we have that agreement, because that was another question, like, why are we picking the site and what's been all the,
But I'm just saying, so
So-
250 isn't really the number because 32 of those are already accounted for.
well, 250 is the number that would be constructed as part of.
Gotcha.
Part
Okay.
of it.
Yep.
That's what that is.
Right.
And the 32, they're not like set aside and reserved for that business. Just when they build whatever they're gonna build, they get that credit towards their parking count in their plan review. Like they don't have signs up to say these 32 spots are reserved for business A. They just, when they put forward their plan, if they were required to have 60 spots, they would get credit for having donated 32 to the city, and they would now only be required to provide 28 on-site spots, is how that would work legally.
But physically, that it's not 32 from 250. The 250 was to construct the structure.
Sure.
and the original agreement was with Will Petty in 2004. So, so that's in our packet too, because that was something that was presented to us, and so at least that's a front-facing, transparent document of why the city owns that parcel, who paid for improvements on that particular parcel, and yeah. Okay, so with respect to this agenda item, we definitely can continue talking about, if we'd like as a council, this hotspot funding, the breakdown of what is currently being talked about for dispersed parking, for the structure, the transportation hub, and have our thoughts out there in a transparent way, if you guys would like to do that now for this agenda item. We also can move on to new business and continue this conversation with respect to agenda item 10.1.
Well, what's also on this item is the possible time limits on Main Street.
Oh, true, yes, well, so one thing that I would like to hear back from this council about is whether or not we want to move forward with restricting parking on Main Street to 2 or 3 hours. Because that's something that would not be tied to hotspot funding, but could be something that we could provide direction to staff to bring forward to us as a recommendation that we could move forward with very directly.
I think that's worth investigating throughout this process. The hotspot and follow-up meetings, we've heard that there can be day-long occupation of parking on Main Street, which doesn't really support commerce. And even in the absence of a more robust enforcement system, it sends people the message that they should maybe look for off-main parking if they are planning to just park it all day.
Do we have the capacity within our police department? I know that we had been talking about having somebody, an officer dedicated to traffic, in particular on Main Street.
Obviously, we prioritize as needed. Last year, when we came on to having a full staff, we started doing some parking enforcement along with the red curbs on Main and others, and so it is something we could consider and start looking into for sure.
And currently have the capacity, like?
Yeah, we're fully staffed currently.
Well, so then does anyone on council have opposition to this idea for staff to bring forward a recommendation to us?
No, I think that one's pretty easy,
I would just
easy beginning of a fix.
add that given the interest that parking garners in this community, that making sure that all interested parties are apprised of what we're thinking about prior to acting on it.
That would be all of Main Street from north to south. It'd be all of Moab. What do you mean?
I mean, we've been called upon to be more transparent with the back-end parking that created a lot of hubbub, which takes up our time, staff time, business owners' time. So just maybe front-loading the process a little bit more to make sure that, like, when it rolls out, that we don't second guess and other people don't second guess us.
And you can roll that out a block at a time and give those businesses a heads up. It doesn't have to be from 4th North to 4th South all at once. If you roll that out a block at a time, it phases it in.
Well, and this would be even communication before we even get to the decision-making, right?
Right.
All right. Well, that sounds productive. But back to the hotspot funding. So is that clear direction with respect to at least that as it relates to these projects? Okay. Council, do you want to, does anyone have any further comments or questions about hotspot funding for now?
No, right now, I think we probably need to move on and have further discussions about all of those, because some of them actually involve private property, and we can't just go take it. So I think we need to just have more conversations about each one of those particular parcels.
Well, I did speak with Joel in getting really organized around dispersed parking. So the idea of, instead of having, conversations loosely organized among people, with the consideration, and Joel, if you still feel good about this, really looking to the planning department to be, as this is, a planning, and working, with the engineering department too, to make sure all the traffic parts and the engineering parts are addressed as we're moving forward. But having the planning department head up those organized committee or working group meetings. So developing the working groups, doing the outreach, calling the meetings, and then taking minutes. I don't know if we would record, but at minimum taking minutes of those meetings so that we could move forward with progress on the dispersed parking plans.
Yep, and we can record them as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how does the council feel about that?
I think they should have probably been public meetings all along and should have been recorded and had minutes taken, even if they're noticed as workshops. They probably should be.
Anything we do in this room, we can broadcast.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Happy to do it.
Okay. Well, let's move on then to new business, unless anybody else has any final comments. Okay. 10-1, canceling design and construction of the downtown parking structure. Council members?
Yeah, we're going to throw out a slightly new idea. It's getting late. I think we're all aware that this issue is going to come up, not for a vote tonight, but it's scheduled for a vote, or will be requested to come up to be scheduled for a vote at the next regular council meeting after a public hearing at that time. My original goal in bringing it up tonight was just to kind of get it out there on the floor for public debate in the next 2 weeks. Given that we're running late, and you guys have suggested that the resolution as it's worded will need to be reworded slightly for legal reasons, to be dotted i's and crossed t's, if you will. I would be willing to entertain, well, there's no really motion entailed here, but to simply forego further discussion of this, or at least make the discussion quite quick tonight, and instead have a full discussion at the public hearing and afterwards at the next meeting.
I think that's a good idea, Mike. If you realize that the resolution itself needs some rewording, it doesn't make any sense to hash that through right now.
Yeah.
If we're just scheduling a public hearing, let's just schedule the public hearing and move on.
Yeah. So you're aware that the rewording really doesn't change the content or the intent of it. It just makes it legally more airtight, as I understand it.
That's what a resolution should be. So
no argument there. Yeah. So I don't know. How do you feel about it, Karen? I mean.
No, I think that's great. I think we should save this discussion for.
So we will have our day in the sunshine or rain at the next regular council meeting. We'll be prepared for that.
Did you want to bring up the letter of consensus that was presented to us at the joint meeting?
not in our
No.
packet.
No.
No.
Okay. And so on March 10th, we're planning to have a public hearing on the resolution.
That's correct.
So, Mike, I think as you were the author of this resolution, to work with Joel and Carly to make sure that the packet has the resolution ready for the public hearing.
Yep, I have it in my notes to set a meeting with Mike and Karen, so we can do that.
It'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. 10-2, proposed ordinance 2020-3, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Municipal Code, Section 17.69.50E, to allow the City Council to consider smaller unit sizes for workforce housing units that are built on site at the time of project construction. Nora, welcome.
Hi,
Thanks for sticking in.
I am going to try to open this. I haven't been having good luck with my computer in this room, but I will try.
It's haunted.
And so obviously one of the citizens to be heard that was presented was along with this issue.
Right.
And so, Mayor, what we're going to do going forward is we're going to prepare a citizens to be heard statement for you to read at the beginning to clarify how that process works between citizens to be heard and agenda items and public hearings, and what the differences are and the restrictions, so we can move away from the time issue of going over in the presentations, and we'll have that for you for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. We're lucky today. Okay. This is an amendment that we've been discussing with the Planning Commission really for a couple months. And it's an amendment to our assured workforce housing ordinance, or that section of the code. And there's probably a little bit of background information that I can give you that that might clarify things a little bit. But when we first started this process, and I wasn't here, but apparently the PAD, which is also another ordinance which we adopted, and the workforce housing were kind of tracking together for quite some time. And what ended up happening is that the WAHU, or workforce housing, was ultimately approved before the PAD. And then when the PAD was approved, and at that time, when the workforce housing, there was discussion about the unit size. And then when the PAD was approved, it's being in a separate section of the code, again, minimum size was discussed. And in the PAD, it says you can go down to as small as 275 square feet. However, the existing language in the workforce housing provisions, and this is what the code says, is it says the area of affordable housing units built pursuant to the construction requirement shall be an average of not less than 1,000 square feet per unit. Developers shall provide a mix of one-bedroom and larger units based on the expected needs of the project as further specified in the development improvement agreements and or the LURA, which is a land use something agreement.
Real estate agreement?
Yeah. And what happened is we're learning about this because it's only, we've only had it on the books for a while. And to date, most of the projects have opted to do a fee in lieu. And I think they're doing that because they think it makes more sense financially for their project, and they think it's the sort of cheapest option. We did have one developer that looked at buying some houses and deed restricting them. And once we got into the nuts and bolts of that, it wasn't going to work as easily as we thought, and they opted to just pay the fee in lieu so that they could start construction. Nobody else has offered to build the units on site yet. As Elizabeth mentioned in her presentation, and as you well know, there are several options for fulfilling this requirement. They can be based at fee in lieu, which is a certain dollar per square foot of the overall structure. So you multiply that, and if it's a hotel, it's $15.57 per square foot, and that's based on a 60,000 square foot project. So that's the fee in lieu. The second option is to actually build units either on-site or off-site. I think that we have discussed the advantages of building units on-site at the time that the project is built, because then we're not waiting. Then we have a project that gets built, and then there's a housing obligation that goes right along with that at exactly the same time. And so a hotel developer came in, and we were talking about the various sections of the code and the options, and every one is kind of a negotiated discussion. And ultimately, the city council has to approve. If we enter into a LURA, you'd have to approve that. And every project is different and has different requirements. So this is what the code says now, and I think the 1,000 square feet, from my understanding, was based on some of the economic models we ran to try to figure out what the demand for housing was and how much it cost, and to base our numbers on that we had in this ordinance. The Planning Commission version of the recommendation of this section came forward with an average of not less than 500 square feet, and Chris McEnany was a proponent of that. And he felt, from an equity standpoint, if we really want somebody to build it on site, then they might have to be a little bit smaller, just because that's the way the numbers work. And I think that's what Elizabeth showed a little bit today. So initially, we went to the Planning Commission and said, okay, so what if we were to take the maximum or average square feet and reduce it from not an average of 1,000, but to not less than 400 square feet per unit. And the Planning Commission, and allow a studio configuration, which the existing language does not allow. We talked about that a fair amount. We had planning commissioners who felt that, you know, absolutely, let's get it built now. If they use 400 square feet, makes sense, great. We had planning commissioners who felt that if they go to 400 square feet, then they need to provide the same square footage that they would have if they were 1,000 square feet. So they'd have to build at least twice as many in order to fulfill the obligation. And what that would do is they would likely pay the fee in lieu. So we talked it through. Planning commissioners had various ideas. And the night before the meeting, this kind of idea at 2 o'clock in the morning came into my brain. And what it says is that the average would continue to be 1,000 square feet per unit if it's built, and that's primarily if it's off-site or wherever. But that as an incentive to get workforce housing built on-site concurrent with the development of the project, and that targets the affordability needs of the future employees of the project, the City Council may consider a smaller unit size and/or configuration. Part of the reason this makes sense is that it's really a kind of a negotiated deal between the hotels and the city, how they're exactly going to meet their obligation. And since it's already a negotiated deal, it seemed like the City Council was the logical board to take that into consideration. So that's why this language was proposed as kind of a compromise from the Planning Commission, and that's what you have before you today. And I sent you a link to the Planning Commission, their deliberation, because I didn't have draft minutes yet.
Thanks, Nora.
Sure.
So everyone's clear what is before us? Any questions for Nora?
So essentially what you're saying is there's not a square foot requirement, but it's up to each individual hotel owner to negotiate with us based on the needs of what they think their employees will require.
So as recommended by Planning Commission, the area, there would be a minimum.
I told you it was haunted.
We did have a.
There we go. The original language would remain, and we just add in studio so that it could be a configuration. But it still requires an average of 1,000 square feet. And we left that the way it is in the code right now, pretty much, and then added the section that gives the City Council discretion to negotiate the unit size for projects that are building it at the same time as the project and oriented toward the employees that will eventually work there.
And it can be on-site or off-site.
It could be. I mean, somebody could come with either proposal. And that's the whole thing. It's like every time we do one of these, it becomes looking at options and negotiations.
Okay.
So the average, it seems like there's the total square footage of housing that gets built, and then there's the average size of the units. And
right.
I don't really care about the average size. I do care about the total square foot, because that's kind of the definition of the exaction for built units.
Right.
It sounds like there is the FILC and the total square footage are not as well aligned as perhaps was intended.
I think that's true, and that's probably because of construction costs. And so somebody who actually wants to build them is going to have to subsidize their cost. And also, they can only charge, if for a very low income, they can only charge for folks with incomes that are considered very low.
And for low, they can only charge what's low. Exactly. And so forth.
Right, exactly.
But it's still an income stream for the owner.
In most cases, I suspect they would be subsidizing the rent. Or construction of the units to begin with, but there would have to be, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. And if the requirement were that the units had to be 1,000, they would pay the FILC.
So
That's
Nora,
just
I gotta-
what makes sense from a dollars and cents standpoint for them. So
So-
this
so-
is an idea and a suggestion, because we thought, gosh, if somebody actually wants to build them on site, more power to them.
I think Mike has a comment.
Okay.
I have a question. So Nora, under the proposed language, it comes in front of council, and I kind of like that flexibility. I mean, and the developer makes their pitch for a certain mix of ratios, and gee, this is what we can afford, and here's why it more or less satisfies their obligation, no more, no less, under Wahoo. And suppose for whatever the reason, council doesn't like it, okay? Then what happens next? I guess is my question.
Discretionary, because we just ran out of batteries.
Yeah, just pull it on over. That's fine.
Well, with technology today. It's a discretionary, it's, all part of the negotiations. It's as if we brought a LURA to you, and you decided when you were reviewing that LURA that you didn't like the terms of the LURA. You could certainly change those. So then the same thing would happen. It doesn't say you have to. It says that based upon what they're proposing and where they're proposing it, and it would apply only to units that are built at the same time the project is constructed on-site and targeted toward people who would work there or other places with similar wages. That's the only way that you could provide that reduction in unit.
Okay, well, yeah, that helps, thank you.
For what it's worth, I am encouraged by the interest in developers developing the housing themselves instead of us. And so I think understanding the numbers is important to us, because for every unit that is built by a hotel developer, that's a unit that we don't have to worry about, and that we just work with them for compliance. And for what it would be deed restricted, yeah. The other piece of that is that the developer's inclined to build units because then that's their asset, and that asset's going to appreciate, and at some point, 50 years, right? It's theirs. So it is nice. I do worry about the idea of an employer hanging housing over the head of their employees, but the way that Moab is, it's a transient workforce but I appreciate the information that got us to where we are today, and I appreciate the Planning Commission's deliberation over it. The only thing that I'm cautious about is this council having this as something for consideration where developers, it's very important for developers to have like the rules in front of them so they know what they can do. And so this is just creates some ambiguity that might be very uncomfortable for a developer. And if we want to incentivize them to do the construction instead of a fee in lieu, I'm concerned about the ambiguity, but I understand that this is a way to get there. So those are my comments about that.
So Nora, can I just to be clear?
Sure.
We are not discussing changing the scope of the square footage, correct? I mean, in terms of 1,000, I mean, so the example was, what was it, 18? What was the number that they had to build?
They have to build 10 or 11.
10 or 11 units or 10 at 1,000 square feet?
Oh, well, their requirement, if they decide to go, I don't know. if
10
it's
to
very low or
412
extremely
units.
Very low, is I think 11 units,
But yeah, currently under the standard, they'd each have to be 1,000 square feet.
and they each
Okay.
have to be 1,000
So
square feet.
we are only discussing changing the size of that 1,000 square feet, and just like the planning commission, they said, okay, so you could do 2 500.
Well, the planning commission couldn't come to consensus on that, that it should work that way. They felt that a smaller overall square footage made some sense in it as an incentive to get the housing built at the time of construction of the major project, and at an income level that targeted people who worked there or similar types of jobs. So they are not necessarily recommending that the total square footage is based on the 1,000 square foot platform would be the same. I mean, it could be, and that's the way it reads now.
Right.
But what the current recommendation is, and you could certainly easily choose not to go that way, is to allow some flexibility in that unusual instance where they're actually building it on site at the same time.
So it would be up to council.
Yes,
Each
exactly.
individual developer.
Right.
But we're not reducing the total amount of square.
Yes, we
Yeah,
would
we
be.
are.
You're not the total number of units required to be built, just the total area of square feet of
Okay.
each unit.
Okay.
So
Same
in a
number of
sense,
units,
that
but
is
smaller.
That is a
square
reduction.
footage,
It
yeah.
is.
But it's not the number of units. Still would
Right.
require 10 or 11 units.
And I
But-
think everyone's gonna come to us and then we're gonna be like, oh, I know this is a really tough decision. And I think that's gonna be complicated for this council.
So another thing you could do
do
is,
hard
if
stuff.
you're so inclined, you could actually say,
Well, it's just the reason why we took it's not this, I don't mean the members of this council, I mean this body,
I understand.
no matter whom is sitting in these chairs. And that's why we took conditional use permitting out of our code, was because we didn't want to be,
I understand.
we
But
wanted
this
to
is,
have harder rules.
but this is kind of this is not necessarily a planning issue, it is a negotiating issue on what their commitment is to build affordable housing. So
Right.
it's a little bit different, but, if you were inclined to say, yeah, smaller units should be allowed if they're building it on site at the time of construction and targeted toward their employees, and they can go down to 500 square feet or whatever you decide and codify that, so then there would be some expectation. You could do that too.
So currently, is there a minimum unit size for the on-site housing?
An average of 1,000 square feet.
No, but what's the minimum? What's the smallest unit they can build?
500 according to our existing code, not related to this.
So even if this said 400, it's still 500. You can't go.
Well,
Oh.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
you-
400 or 500, whatever you,
mean, I
You
looked
would,
in-
you would be able to build at 400 under this setup, because even though you have a minimum of 500, this would be last in time. And where you have two rules that are conflicting with one another that are passed by the same body, you would apply the newest rule in that situation. So it would be 500 across the board everywhere else, but within this setting, you would be permitting a 400 exception to that 500 rule.
like we did with the pad. Pad went down to 275.
So if we didn't allow a reduction in square footage, but we allowed additional units, we could essentially double the amount. If they decided to do all studios, it could be like 20 studios,
22, yeah.
22 studios instead of 10 larger units.
But they're not going to do that.
But we're asking them to provide a mix. We're not saying all studios.
So now let me paint another example, if I may, and see if I got this right. Under the current code, without any negotiation, suppose that an applicant comes in and says, oh, we're required to build 10 1,000 square foot units, okay? And then they say, well, that's awfully expensive, that's more than what we would do to pay under the fee. But tell you what, we'll make you a deal. We think that to build 700 or 500 square foot units still provides quite adequate housing for the people. And it brings our numbers down well underneath what we would pay. And we as a group would decide that even though we're not getting as much that way, the advantages, as you say, of having them build it on site at that time, we don't have to deal with it, would be a suitable negotiating tactic. So if you encourage the applicant to make those side-by-side comparisons without negotiation and with, then it would be fairly easy for us to see if this is a reasonable deal or not. And with a little bit of practice, I would venture that it would, the applicant would have a pretty good handle on what we would accept and what we wouldn't. So that would reduce their uncertainty. So I kind of like that idea myself.
I just want to state again, like, I'm all for developers building the housing. On-site is easier for them and is going to actuate units right away. I understand what Karen's saying, though, is I think that's what you were implying is, like, do we want to lose some of that square footage by allowing to go smaller? Is there a compromise to be able to say, well, you still have to build all that square footage, but you can do smaller units and you don't have to go so big? Like, you can have more smallers, but you still got to meet your.
Right. That would be an option as well.
What did the planning commission say about that?
Again, they were split. There was kind of one person real strongly on each side, and then the other sort of fell in the middle. And, there are advantages and disadvantages, so.
There are.
But nor they, maybe I'm missing something to me. No applicant would ever do that. In other words, if suppose they were going to build the choice of 10,000 square foot apartments or 20 500 square foot apartments, to me it's clear that it's less expensive to build 10 bigger units than it is to build 20 smaller units. They all got walls and and all the other fixed things. They just wouldn't do that.
I don't know if
I mean,
they
it
would or
would
not, but
it would be more.
it doesn't seem like economically.
But they would
it
have
really
more
makes sense.
units that then they would rent out to whether or not they were their employees. They would open that up to the workforce pool,
Sure.
correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Same income level.
So Wahoo already has an independent feasibility analysis, which I understand has been used, and it doesn't kick it to the city council, and it kicks it to, it stays with staff as an administrative decision.
Yes.
And I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I feel like there's.
You don't want to change that? I'm willing to give it back to you.
That's what I was afraid of.
And that would be, to do that, we just leave everything the way it is.
Well, except that there's still the possible misalignment between the FILC and the on-site units, which just incentivizes the FILC, and so maybe that needs to be adjusted. Okay. But still, but adjust that so there's an objective standard.
Okay.
And that might take the form of decoupling this talk about units from the total square footage, because I feel like it's confusing everyone. And so that might mean a little bit of a change to the table. And then we can get rid of the word average unit size, the average in it, because I feel like if there's a shortage of studios, like there's a lot of single people and couples that don't want to share a house. And so let's let developers build those, even if they're less than 500 square feet, because 500 can still be too big, and give them that flexibility. So that's the direction I'd like to go, and maybe the council as a whole.
Can you restate that, maybe not quite in motion form, but are you saying like you're in favor of this recommendation, however you would change the city council to the staff?
No, there's already an independent feasible 17.69.070. So that's the possibility for developers to negotiate based on the economics of their particular project still exists. But the disconnection between the on-site unit cost or economics and the FILC still remains, it sounds like. And so it seems like maybe in terms of the current code, how that would translate is the average unit size would go down to 800 square feet. And then I don't know what the exact number is.
So,
But not expressing it as average unit size,
Right.
because that means that they have to build big ones in addition to small ones, and I want to give them the flexibility to build more small ones.
so what does that look like in terms of a motion?
It looks like a motion to table and remand it
Yeah.
to Nora, and I'm happy to work on it,
Yeah,
or,
yeah, that'd be great.
because, I mean, I have a spreadsheet where I've looked at this, and I have a draft rewording, but I'm not prepared to present it, and.
And that would be totally appropriate too.
And so, oh gosh, and so then it would,
Was that a motion to table?
oh, was it?
No,
I didn't know that.
no,
that was
it
an
was not a
official-
motion to
I
table.
didn't hear that as an official motion.
I didn't
No.
know.
No, I was just saying that's what you asked me what I would do, and I said, that's what I
Right.
would do, but it's not what I'm doing.
Okay.
I move that we table the motion as described, all right?
Thanks, Mike. Is
And
there a
encourage
oh,
Councilmember Jones to work with Nora Shepherd, the staff lady, for the next presentation.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'll
Motion
be in
pa- wait,
touch, Kayla.
Do we, oh, no, she's
table
off.
Passes, correct. Was the second by Karen? Tani. Okay, moving right along. Just to say really quickly, I know that from a developer's perspective, expediting, like, the sooner we can get that done, the better, only because,
I plan on putting it on the next agenda on the 10th.
fantastic, okay, that would be
And
great.
the 10th's going to be packed. Just giving y'all a heads up.
Oh, the tent is gonna,
I know.
I keep moving stuff back because the subject matter of certain agenda items keeps getting like, well, that's an hour, well, that's an
yeah,
hour.
well,
And
maybe,
so I keep moving stuff off, but at
maybe we
some
can
point we just gotta.
bifurcate parking
yeah.
with everything else for the next meeting. Okay, Chuck, welcome. So Chuck's here for questions. 10-3, approval of change orders for and briefing on Mill Creek Drive West Extension Project construction. So you are here for questions.
Yeah,
And
I think maybe the one thing to summarize, that you've all read the agenda summary in the backup, is this is the Aggie Boulevard project, which real quickly was funded by a CIB loan, CIB grant, contributions from the city, contributions from Grand County, contributions from SITLA. Total budget, $2.678241 million. Harrison Oilfields was the low bid contractor, and their base bid was $1,935,000 and change. Throughout the course of the project, we experienced unknowns. We discovered that was the wet year we had, and there was a spring that was right in the middle of the road. We had to over-excavate and bridge the spring and put in a French drain system and such. So there were unknowns that came up, and if you also recall, this is city road with Grand Water Sewer Agency water and sewer. So as it turned out, Grand Water and Sewer was bringing their new sewer line up the west side of the highway, which, was kind of late breaking news. And we said, well, rather than have them come rip up Aggie Boulevard, 1 year after we built it, let's go ahead and put in the connector pipe, which wasn't in the original design, but it was all part of the project because it's still serving it, and that was a change order. So change orders for Harrison, I think, were all justified. One thing, sometimes change orders are deductions too. We'll get into a project and we'll say, that's not necessary, here's a better way to value engineer it. And there were some of those in this as well. And then for civil science was our construction management firm assisting us. And because the project took longer, and because our construction inspector was so busy, and we were so busy, we had to supplement them with a field inspector from civil science. So their original contract was $122,200, change order $33,900. So the total base contract for the two firms was $2,057,278. Total change order is $177,682, or 8.6%. Again, UDOT puts in typically 15% contingency for change orders throughout the course of a project. I've told you before, and the industry standard is somewhere between 10 and 20%. I think if you can get by with less than 10% in these larger scale projects, we're doing pretty good, because it's the unknowns that we're dealing with change orders. And the good news is, though, we had available overall total budget $2,678,241, and even with the change orders and the base contracts, we have a remaining budget of $443,280. So the project still comes in under budget from what was originally put together.
So Chuck, when companies bid this thing, to what extent is it essentially a time and materials sort of contract? I mean,
No, it's, we have a set of plans and a set of specifications, and then we'll have a bid tab, which says, bid us, as an example, per square foot of 4-inch thick concrete, because there's a shared use path out there.
Sure.
So they'll bid quantities. It's not a time and materials. But when it comes to change orders, if we don't have a quantity price, so let's say as an example, we wanted to add 40 linear feet of sidewalk, a shared use path, and we know how much the bid price was, say $25 a square foot. We just multiply, do the math to figure out, and then that's what the amount of change order is. But if it's something that's the unknown, then we actually have them put together here's how much a piece of operated equipment costs, here's how much an operator costs, here's how much profit is, and we'll sit there and go back and forth and negotiate it to reasonable quantity.
yeah, so just to clarify, just a tiny bit, suppose the contractor says he figures it's going to take me 100 hours to do job A, and he bids you a price commensurate with that at a certain labor rate and so forth. And then when he gets out there, he finds out just because he didn't understand, or, it takes him 120 hours, can he come back to you and ask you to pay him?
No, that's not a change condition.
That's not a change order.
No, that's not a change condition. That's not a change.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify.
Yeah, no, change orders are for addressing changed conditions from the original plans and specifications that are necessary for the project or benefit the city.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't supplement the contract.
Well, that's what I would call a statement of work. I mean, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the change orders for the Mill Creek Drive West Extension Project construction for Harrison Oilfield Services Incorporated in the amount of $143,782.23, and Civil Science Incorporated in the amount of $33,900.
Thank you, Tani.
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. I just have a quick question, because we are the ones with the contract, we're stuck with the extra money.
No, so what will,
Paying the extra.
so what will happen is, we actually fronted the design contract, which was about $150,000. We'll subtract that out of the $443,000 to reimburse the city out of the joint pool of funds. Then the remaining funds, which is approximately $290,000, we'll distribute proportionally back to everyone. That's what all of our agreements say.
Yeah.
The agreement with Sitla, the agreement with the county, they
Chuck.
get their proportional share back.
Mayor, may I ask a question? So I'm just in the request for the contract amendment from Civil Science. Just in number 2, it just says that the city inspector was occupied with work on 100 West, and therefore Greg was asked to stay on the project until March 20th. I mean, did that equal up the 33,000?
No.
Okay.
No, they had to do design changes as well. That was a portion of it, the additional inspection. So sometimes we have to do work directives that say, here's the design for repairing this, putting in the new sewer line that I talked about. So we paid them, because they were the design engineer also, to do the design that's sometimes necessary to conduct a change order. Makes sense. So when we uncovered the underground water, we had to figure out what to do, and it wasn't just, we had to develop a set of plans to give to the contractor to give us a bid. So that's also part of that $33,000.
Okay.
Any further questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Does it need to be roll call?
No, Ronnie's not on the phone.
Oh.
Like the last one, right?
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. 10-4 annexation petition from sponsor Paul W. Jones for Lions Back Holdings LLC, 3.12 acres, 3.12 acres located at approximately 938 and 940 South Main. Joel?
I'll be quick. This is the petition acceptance by the council. When we adopted the annexation pre-agreement, all we adopted when we did that was, these will be the terms if you are annexed into the city. By accepting this petition, it starts the process. I emailed you guys all out the procedures, the timeframes. So this will now start the process. It'll get us rolling to certify it, which will then lead to the public hearings where the public will come in and you can hear them. You'll get the actual petition, and then you can actually vote after all those hearings and any protests that are filed, then you would actually vote on whether or not you wanted to annex the actual property into the city. So this just starts the process.
Thank you, Joel. You have a question or a motion?
I have a motion.
Yes.
I move to accept the annexation petition from sponsor Paul W. Jones for Lions Back Holdings LLC for 3.12 acres located at approximately 938 and 940 South Main to proceed with the certification process.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Any final discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Approval of bills against the city of Moab.
I move to approve the bills in the amount of $443,187.22.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. Discussion?
Trying to see what was,
I will say one thing, that I
exciting?
am very encouraged with our efforts to buy locally, and really appreciate your reviewing of the bills, and definitely want to say to Joel and Carly and staff that how important it really is for us to look at and continue to shop locally. And so
Yeah,
I'm
I'm-
grateful of your review of the bills so that we can.
trying to
Yes,
get here to
accountability.
our Amazon pages. That's,
I guess we have 4 minutes until 10. So.
I know. There's some things that still could be worked on that are just simple things that people just do without thinking, but they are getting better.
What are those?
What are they?
Yeah, I can't fix what I don't know. Enlighten me.
Zebra pens,
Okay.
Bic pens.
But they don't have zebras here locally.
They can order them.
Okay. So it's still stationary. Okay.
It's still office supplies.
That's what I need
Yeah.
to know.
It's still office supplies. Everything else, I mean, there's some folders and some things like that. And I'm guessing I'll just give you this.
Yeah,
And
that might work.
Thank you.
I think most of it, some of it they can't get locally, but those simpler things they can. So,
Thank you, Tawny. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
I,
Motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Kaylin. Second. Thank you, Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.
One last chance on cookies, kids, before you leave?
No, thank you. However,